In the year 742 of the 41st millennium, I was decanted from the Schola Progenium with a Mordecai's investiture and a posting to the 55th Capic Eagles. I was young, filled with the fire of the catechisms, and eager to serve the God Emperor in whatever capacity he saw fit. The Damocles Gulf Crusade was a worthy furnace for such zeal. I was reassigned to the Brimlock Dragoons in time for the push on the Xenos world of Daleth, and it was there, in the grey dust of a city dying under the guns of the Tau, that my zeal was scoured away by plasma. I remember the sound, not a bang, but a sharp, clean hiss, like tearing silk. It's a sound that still haunts my dreams. One moment I was dragging a screaming guardsman with a belly wound into the relative cover of a shattered block wall. The next, a white-hot fist slammed into my shoulder, spinning me around. Pain was absolute, a clean, searing agony that eclipsed all thought. I remember staring dumbly at my arm. The flak weave of my uniform melted away, the flesh beneath blackened and bubbling. The pulse round had flash carbonized the bone and boiled the blood in my veins. The smell was of cooked meat. My meat. I would have died there, another anonymous corpse in the grey dust, had it not been for Trooper Rost, my orderly. His face, a mask of grime and terror, appeared above me. He was shouting, but I couldn't hear him over the ringing in my ears. He hoisted me over his shoulder, a dead weight, and began to run. The sky was raining blue fire, each impact a sharp snap hiss, another soul sent to the Emperor's judgment. I remember the lurching of Rost's run, the way my head lolled, the taste of blood in my mouth. Then, nothing. The rest is a fever dream of pain and filth. I awoke in the overflowing wards of a base nosocomium on the agri-world of Prefectia. It was a place of perpetual twilight, the air thick with the stench of disinfectant, unwashed bodies, and despair. The groans of the dying were a constant liturgical choir, a soundtrack to my recovery. For months I drifted in and out of consciousness, my dreams filled with the hiss of plasma and the terrified face of Trooper Rost, a man to whom I owed a life I no longer wanted. Just as my strength began to return, I was struck down by the Vraskian scab pox, that bloody curse of our off-world campaigns, likely brought in with a fresh batch of wounded from another front. My fever burned for weeks. By the time it broke, the Mordecai board declared me unfit for continued service. I was so weak I could barely stand, my arm a useless thing of scarred flesh and cheap augmetics that whirred and clicked with every movement. I was a broken tool, no longer fit for the Emperor's wars. They shipped me to Hive Sibellus on the troop ship Orontes. I spent the journey in a crowded hold with 1,000 other broken men, the air thick with the smell of stale sweat and bitter regret. A paternal minotaurium granted me a meager pension, 11 thrones and 6 scrip a day, and 9 months to find a new purpose before the Adeptus Administratum claimed my life for some menial, ink-stained damnation. I had neither clan nor kin on Sibellus. I was adrift in the great, smog-choked wilderness of the Mid-Spire, a place where a man with a handful of thrones can disappear in 1,000 different ways. The air itself is a thick soup of promethium fumes and acid rain that sizzles on the ferrocrete walkways. The sun is a myth, a forgotten god, its light a dim, perpetual twilight filtered through a kilometer of toxic clouds. The constant, distant wail of sirens and the roar of bulk lifters is the city's heartbeat, a rhythm of endless, meaningless toil. I took a room in a reeking hostelry, my days a cycle of staring at the grime-streaked plasteel window and trying to forget the hiss of pulse rifles in my dreams. My pension dwindled. I knew I had to find a purpose, or the hive would simply swallow me whole. It was on the day I had resolved to sell my Mordecai's kit for passage to some forgotten agri-world that I found myself in the Gilded Saint, a drinking hole where off-duty enforcers and sour-faced spy merchants traded whispers over glasses of amasec. The air was thick with smoke from cheap Iho sticks and the low murmur of 100 clandestine deals. A hand fell upon my shoulder. It was Adeptus Biologus Thrax, a former colleague from the Mordecai Scholem. "By the throne, Vorn! I thought you were a corpse on Daleth," he exclaimed, his face a welcome sight in the gloom. His own robes were clean, that of a man with a steady function, a stark contrast to my own worn and stained fatigues. Over a measure of foul-tasting recaf that scraped the back of my throat, I gave him the short, grim summary of my life since the war. He listened, his expression growing more somber with every detail, his eyes occasionally darting around the smoky room as if to confirm we were not being overheard. "Poor devil," he said, shaking his head, "to survive all that only to be consumed by this place. What is your function now?" "Leaving," I answered bluntly. "There's no function for me here." My voice was a dry rasp, unused to this much conversation. I took a sip of the bitter recaf. "I intend to sell my Medicae's kit for passage to an agri-world. I hear the air is breathable." Thrax leaned closer across the sticky table. The din of the bar seemed to fade into a low hum. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Function," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Perhaps there is one. You're seeking a new master, a new post." "I am," I said, a flick of something long dormant, curiosity perhaps, stirring in my gut. "What is it?" "It is an opportunity," he said, choosing his words with the care of a man handling unstable chems. "A dangerous one. I work now at the Skolem's high security wing, the Genitor Labs. We service special clients. There is an Inquisitor, a brilliant man, but difficult. He had an opening in his retinue." Thrax paused, his gaze intense. "For an acolyte with your exact skills, Medicae training, military experience, especially in the Damocles Gulf. An opening. The world hung in the air between us. In the Imperium, such openings are rarely created by peaceful retirement." "What happened to his last acolyte?" I asked, my voice flat. Thrax took a long sip of his amasec and refused to meet my eyes, instead studying the skull and cog motif etched into the grime on the wall. "He retired," he said, the words carefully chosen. "Abruptly. The position is available. The work is hazardous. The Inquisitor is a tempest, but it is a purpose, Vorn, a great one." A cold thrill, something I hadn't felt since the drop pods screamed towards the surface of Daleth, ran through me. An Inquisitor, a name that was a prayer on the lips of the faithful and a curse on the lips of the damned. It was a name that meant power. It meant purpose. "What ordo?" I breathed. "Hereticus," Thrax whispered, the word barely audible over the chatter of the bar. He glanced nervously at the other patrons. A sour-faced enforcer, a merchant's agent with augmetic eyes. A Puritan, they say, but a radical empiricist. His methods are unorthodox. They call him Blackstone. He shuddered slightly, a genuine involuntary tremor. Inquisitor Mordecai Blackstone. He is looking for a new instrument, Vorn. Someone to serve as his chronicler and his blade when needed. Someone who has seen the horrors of the galaxy and not broken completely. I thought of you." "Why?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why me?" "Because you are desperate," he said, with the simple, brutal honesty of a chirurgeon. "And because Blackstone values men who have already died once. He says they have less to lose. Shall I take you to him? He is at the laboratory now." I thought of the endless grey years ahead of me, stamping parchment in some forgotten sub-level of the administratum, my soul slowly calcifying into another layer of bureaucratic sediment. I thought of the reek of my hostelry room, a place where hope went to die. Then I thought of the hiss of pulse rifles, the searing pain, the feeling of being alive in the face of absolute oblivion. A choice between two hells. I chose the one with a purpose. "Take me," I said. The ground car Thrax summoned was an unmarked, armored vehicle with no windows, only picked screens showing a grainy, distorted view of the hive outside. The journey was a descent, spiraling down through the transitways from the noisy commerce of the mid-spire to the grim, functional silence of the Scholem district. The air inside the car was cool and sterile. The alchemical laboratory was in a sealed, high-security wing of the Scholem Mordecai. Access was granted only after Thrax's ident chip was scanned by a silent, red-robed magos of the Adeptus Mechanicus, his face a blank, impassive mask of bronze. The corridor beyond was cold, the walls made of dark, unadorned plasteel that seemed to drink the light. The air hummed with the sound of stasis field generators and bubbling vats of amniotic fluid, the building blocks of servitors and other less savory creations. Robed genitors and servo skulls glided through the gloom, their augmetic eyes glowing with a cold blue light. Their work was hidden by swirling chemical fog that smelled of ozone and sterilized flesh. Thrax led me to a secluded chamber at the far end of the corridor, the door a heavy slab of adamantium. The room was a chaotic mess of arcane equipment and forbidden knowledge. Specimen jars containing things I could not and did not wish to identify lined the walls. A preserved Xenos limb floating in amber fluid, a human skull with a third empty eye socket, a jar of writhing iridescent insects. A massive complex data loom flickered with incomprehensible streams of binary, its constant quiet clicking a counterpoint to the bubbling of a dozen glass retorts. In the center of the room, a tall, impossibly thin man was bent over a table, his back to us. "Inquisitor Blackstone," Thrax said, his voice trembling slightly. The man turned. His face was hawkish, dominated by a sharp nose and piercing, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He was clad in the simple black robes of a scholar, but they hung upon him like the robes of a judge. He held up a phial containing a single drop of crimson liquid, holding it to the light with a reverence usually reserved for a holy relic. "Purity," he exclaimed, his voice a dry, triumphant baritone. "I have it. A reagent that is precipitated by the bioparticulate of a gene stealer, and by nothing else." His excitement was not one of joy, but of a predator who had perfected a new kind of bullet, a weapon of absolute surgical precision. "Acolyte Karthus Vorn, my lord," Thrax said, pushing me forward slightly into the Inquisitor's line of sight. Inquisitor Blackstone's sharp eyes fixed on me. They did not just look at me, they scanned me, dissected me, analyzed me. He did not greet me, he simply began to speak. "An Acolyte Kyrogen," he stated, his gaze flickering from my face to my augmetic shoulder. He took a step closer, his piercing eyes narrowing. "Capic Eagles, then Brimlock Dragoons. The reassignment was not your choice. The Capic Eagles are a proud line infantry regiment, the Dragoons a mounted reconnaissance unit. An odd transfer for a Medicae, suggesting expediency over strategy. You were a battlefield replacement." He circled me slowly, like a predator inspecting its prey. "Wounded at Daleth by a Tau pulse round. The scarring on your tunic's collar, though faint, is consistent with the vapor flash of a plasma impact at medium range. The augmetic on your shoulder is a standard munitorium-grade replacement, functional but crude. It whirs at a frequency that suggests its lubricant reserves are low, meaning you have not had it serviced. Therefore, you are short on funds." He stopped in front of me again, his eyes boring into mine. "Convalesced on Prefecture, where you contracted the Vraxian scab pox. A logical deduction. The lingering pallor of your skin is not that of a simple Medicae, but of someone who has endured a prolonged system-wide illness. The scab pox was rampant among the Vraxian refugee camps established on Prefecture after the siege. Your uniform, though clean, bears the specific fine red dust of Hive Sibellus' lower transit ways around the cuffs. Yet your skin has not yet acquired the true grey of a long-term resident. You have been on-world for less than a standard month, and your desperation," he said, his eyes glinting, "is as loud as a vox-hailer in a silent room. Adept Thrax was right to bring you to me." I was speechless. The air left my lungs. He had not simply read my life, he had dissected it, laying bare the facts of my existence with the cold, impersonal precision of a post-mortem examination. Thrax, standing by the door, looked as if he was about to be physically sick. So, how in the name of the Golden Throne did you know all that?" I finally stammered, the words feeling small and inadequate in the vast silence of the laboratory. Blackstone placed his precious file down carefully on the workbench. "The Imperium is a sea of data, Acolyte," he said, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone. "Most men drown in it. They see only the chaotic surface. But for one who knows how to look, there are patterns, currents. The universe is a grand cryptogram, and everything from the dust on a man's boot to the tear in his eyes is a piece of the key. I observe, I deduce, it is all I do." He gestured around the chaotic laboratory. "I have need of an instrument with your experiences. I am a man of the mind, Vorn. I require an associate of the body, someone to bear witness, to record my findings with a Mordecai's precision, someone whose hand is steady enough to wield a scalpel or a blade when the situation demands it. The work is dangerous, the hours are long. The last man to hold a position failed to appreciate the distinction between scientific curiosity and terminal stupidity." He gestured to a dark, acid-pitted stain on the far wall. "The pay is non-existent," he continued, his eyes locked on mine. "The risks are absolute. Your former life, what little is left of it, is forfeit from this moment, but you will have a purpose beyond mere survival. You will see the dark heart of this hive, and you will help me cut out its cancers. You will be a part of the great work." He stood there, a spectre of cold, hard logic in the alchemical gloom, offering me a choice between a short, terrifying life of meaning and a long, grey one without it. There was, in the end, no choice at all. This concludes the first part of my meeting with Inquisitor Blackstone. You may append your own approved commentary to the record below. The Ordo Chronos is ever watchful.